All right, a couple things to say before we dive in, all right? Today broke history here at Cap City. I don't know if you're aware of this, but the first time ever in the history of Cap City on stage leading you in worship, the men on stage had used more hair product than the women. It's a big deal. We got to make it, we got to draw attention to it. It's a big moment, guys. Also, just letting you guys know, whenever we have this crazy weather with the snow and everything, and it freezes and it thaws and freezes and thaws, just so you guys know, if you come in this back entrance, it's dangerous because it could come off the building. And so, it wasn't earlier, but it might be by the time we leave. Just be aware, all right? It's massive chunks of ice that might hit you in the head. And unless you're leading worship, you may not be prepared to protect yourself. And so, just want you guys to know, all right? Now, I love those questions that John started with at the beginning. What do you wish you had 5 more of? There's some interesting things in there. Clearly, the one that I want to talk about is football. I'm going to be grieving today. Today's the worst day of the year. I mean it. And I know that the Super Bowl, I love it. I love the Super Bowl. I love the big celebration of football that happens all day. I love the build up to the game. I love the pomp and circumstance that surrounds it all. I love the businesses and how they know that it's a great time for them, and marketing and the commercials that are happening during the game become almost as big as the game itself. In fact, for some of you, maybe you care more about the commercials than you do the game, right? I love the pregame music. I love the national anthem. I love the halftime show, not because I care about any of the people who are doing those things, but because I just love the celebration of the game. Everything around it just feels so much bigger. I love everything about it, except the last 15 minutes of the game. Sometimes the last 15 minutes of the game may be the best part of the game. Either way, today is the worst day of the year. Maybe not today, maybe tomorrow. Tomorrow might be the worst day of the year because it's the day furthest away from the next football game. I don't know. I wish I could give 5 more weeks. I wish that today was the start of the playoffs, not the end of the playoffs, right? And I can tell that some of you have absolutely zero sympathy for me in this, and that's okay. I'd just like to draw your attention to the 49ers beating the Bengals in Super Bowls. Anyways, we're talking about +5 today because we're starting a focus on that part of our vision of 2026. And it's a focus on generosity and faithfulness to what God, I believe, has called us to do, which may cause you to ask some questions right off the bat. Now, a lot of people have lots of different questions about the Bible, about God, about church. Some questions center around God himself. Is there a God? And if there is, what is God like? Some questions kind of have to do with meaning. What's the meaning of life? Or what is my purpose in this world? Or why am I here? Which are all good questions. If you're to compose the questions that people ask about God, just kind of build a list, it wouldn't be long before you got to something about money. It's not the top question, maybe not even top 5, but definitely top 20. Questions like these. What does God say about money? And why do churches talk about money so much? Well, the quick answers to those that God says a lot about money, and Jesus backs that up. Jesus has a lot to say about money. And if Jesus is going to talk about something frequently, then I probably need to teach about whatever that something is fairly frequently. Now, maybe you'd ask, do I have to give money to be a Jesus follower, to be a part of the church? And again, those are good questions. Maybe you'd want to know why. Maybe you'd want to know why I care what you give. Well, I do and I don't. And I don't know what you give, but that question at least does get us much closer to, I think, what is the much bigger, larger question, which is more so than just about me. Let's talk about God. Why does God care what we do with our money? That's the big question. Why does God even care? What's the big deal? Of all the things that Jesus tells us to pay attention to, of all the things that God commands us to do, why money? And that's a great question. And that's one that I think deserves more than just a quick answer. In the New Testament, there's a section of teaching from Jesus that a guy named Matthew recorded. It's known as the Sermon on the Mount. It's 3 chapters long. It's Matthew chapters 5 through 7, 111 verses. And in the middle of the teaching, almost exactly in the middle of the teaching, Jesus offers what we're going to look at today. It's chapter 6, starting in verse 19, where he says, "Do not store up for yourselves treasures on earth." Now, seriously? Maybe Jesus would tell people something like this in his day, but do you think Jesus would say something like that to us now, in the world that we live in? Does this simple little verse, that doesn't just like fly in the face of every natural way that we live? Jesus didn't live in the world that we live in, but in the world that we live in, we have things like refrigerators. Some of us even have deep freezers to hold extra food. In my home, I have a refrigerator in the kitchen. I've got a deep freeze down in our pantry kind of utility room, and then I've got like a second refrigerator that's just for drinks. All right? Jesus says we aren't supposed to store stuff up for ourselves. Do you think he cares about all my fridges? And it goes on. I mean, most of us have a storage shed. Even if you go beyond just the stuff, I mean, most of us, or some of us at least, have 401ks or Roth IRAs or HSAs. If you don't have any of these things, I bet you wish you did. Because our culture loves storing up for the future. Refrigerators and sheds and retirement plans. Does God really mean it? Does Jesus really mean it when he says, don't store up for yourselves treasures on earth? And are those the things that he's talking about? Should we take him seriously? Would we say, should we even be unprepared? Jesus says, do not store up for yourselves treasures on earth where moths and vermin destroy and where thieves break in and steal. But store up for yourself treasures in heaven where moths and vermin do not destroy and where thieves do not break in and steal. For where your treasure is, there your heart will be also. And before you can even begin to push back, just a couple verses later, Jesus says it again. He doubles down. He says, no one can serve two masters. Either you're going to hate the one and you're going to love the other, or you will be devoted to the one and despise the other. You cannot serve both God and money. Why do you think Jesus talks about money so much? I think this passage reveals the reason. It isn't a physical issue about downsizing or minimizing as if Jesus was the first Marie Kondo. It's not some sort of a practical issue for Jesus as if he needed to tell people in his world not to collect too many things in their tiny little homes. How you manage money is a spiritual issue. The things that we store up for ourselves can turn into heart distractors. This is a heart issue, which means that it's a worship issue. The things that we store up for ourselves can turn into those little g gods, the idolatry type gods. We can find anything to worship other than the one that we should truly worship. It almost seems too easy. It's one of the unfortunate skills of every human. Maybe you worship your spouse or your kids instead of worshiping God. Maybe you worship your career or the prestige that you get from your job. Maybe you worship your sports teams, which we've already talked too much about, or your hobbies or whatever form of entertainment that you have. Guys, our hearts are so incredibly fickle. They will worship absolutely anything other than God himself. We will wander anywhere else away from God. So when Jesus says where your treasure is, there your heart will be also, what Jesus is telling us is that one of the most dangerous places that our hearts will wander off to in order to worship something is money. One of the greatest temptations to us that would entice us to worship something other than God is money and the stuff that we get from money. And it's a big deal because Jesus says that the things you treasure are tied to your heart. If money has any hold on you, which is probably 99% of us, then according to Jesus, your heart is tied to money. Do you think that's true? And if you did an audit of my finances, you would know a lot about me, wouldn't you? And if I did an audit of your finances, it would reveal some things about you as well. Doesn't our money tell on us? Where our money goes reveals the things that we care the most about. It'll reveal the decisions that we've made. It reveals where our heart has been. If we looked at your finances, if you looked at my finances, it would reveal whether or not I have God-honoring discipline. It would reveal whether I'm careful to tell my money where to go or if I'm controlled instead by whatever whim I may have. You could look at my finances. You could see how many credit cards I have. And then, I could see yours. And we could see how much patience exists in my purchases. We could see how often Amazon shows up at my house and potentially how dangerous that whole buy now button may be. Looking at each other's finances would also reveal what is most important to us. If I looked at your finances, if you looked at mine, how many streaming subscriptions are there? How often do you go out to eat? Does any of your money go into savings? How much goes into your kids' college fund? And does any of it ever make its way to the church? An audit of your finances would reveal where your treasure is, and it would reveal where your heart has been. And again, Jesus doubles down on this. Jesus ultimately says no one can serve two masters. Either you're going to hate the one and love the other, or you're going to be devoted to the one and despise the other. You cannot serve both God and money. You cannot serve both God and money. And there's so many big ideas in just this very simple little verse. Let's start with this one. That word money that we read there, the Greek word for it is the word mammon. Jesus holds it up against God as if mammon is this lowercase G God. And it's, at first read, as you go through it, it kind of has that feel of an Old Testament idol, some sort of fake little carved, engraved God that they would have bowed down and worshiped. It sounds like that kind of a word, right? Sounds like Jesus calls out one of those little gods and he says, you can't worship both, you can only worship one. But that word mammon, it wasn't a little idol. That word mammon actually is translated really, really well. It's money, it's wealth, it's property. Kind of has this idea of putting your trust in your finances and your stuff in the same kind of way that you may put your trust in God. And so Jesus is telling us that you can't put your trust in God and your trust in money. You can't do it. You see, how you handle money is more than a physical act. It's bigger than the transfer of money for goods or services. There's a spiritual battle going on behind the scenes between two gods who are fighting for your heart. And every time you purchase something, every time you make a financial decision, there's the potential of something much more significant, something spiritually significant happening behind the scenes. And it can be for good or it can be for bad. And the language Jesus uses here is really kind of harsh slave language. He's saying that you serve one of these gods. Everyone worships and everyone serves. You can worship God or you can worship money. You can serve God or you can serve money. But you can't do both. You can't serve money and you can't serve God at the same time. You can't do it. If your biggest goal in life is to make more money, and at the same time say that your biggest goal is to serve God, guys, it doesn't work. And so why would Jesus talk about money all the time? And why do churches and preachers talk about money all the time? And why are we putting an emphasis on giving over the course of this year? Ultimately, because this is a spiritual issue. And if we don't get this right, if we are followers of Jesus who don't get this right, then we can accidentally find ourselves serving and worshiping the wrong master. So let's be very clear. Money isn't bad. Jesus never calls money evil. Jesus even teaches about planning for the future. The 401ks, the Roth IRAs, your HSAs, the shed, and the extra refrigerators. Not necessarily evil or bad. Those could be good things. And yet they can also grow into something that we worship and that we serve. Jesus is teaching us here that there's something bigger going on. There's something spiritual that's happening. Also recognize this. We usually look at this verse from the negative perspective. We talk about money and how it gets in the way of our ability to serve God, but just like it's easy to look at your finances and get exposed for a wandering heart, the opposite can also be true. For some of you, a look at your finances would reveal your dedication to God. It wouldn't expose some sort of a dark area of your soul. It would expose an area that you have beaten into submission. In fact, that's the language I want to steal from Paul, who says that he beats his body into submission so that he can be faithful to God. Some of you have beaten your finances into submission so that you can be faithful to God. Some of you have fought those battles and temptations and you've succeeded and you've passed. And that's beautiful. That's great. So when Jesus says you cannot serve both God and money, there's a positive side to this. If you would serve God, then money isn't going to have its hold on you. And then money becomes a powerful tool for you to serve God with. And maybe you struggle with serving God. Maybe you want to, but it just doesn't come natural. It's difficult. This whole area of finances is an opportunity for you. Because if you can make your money serve God, then your heart will follow. That's what Jesus tells us. Sometimes it doesn't happen in that order. Sometimes our love of God causes us to put money in the right place. Our love of God affects where our money goes. But Jesus tells us the opposite is also true. Sometimes, if we can make our finances honor God, then our heart will follow. And that's why giving is sometimes this solution to mammon. Using your money to serve God. Or you may find yourself serving your money, right? And so make your money a servant to God. And then it won't become your God. Which means that this is one of those places where faithfulness will go far. If you can make your money honor God, even if you don't feel like it, but then you just do it repeatedly out of faithfulness, out of obedience, that over time, eventually your heart will follow. Eventually you'll want to do the God-honoring thing that you've been doing for a while out of simple faithfulness. If you make your money serve God instead of you serving your money, then eventually your heart will follow that decision. And if you keep from making your money your treasure, and if you can make your money serve God, then your heart will be drawn to the mission and the work of God in your life and in the church. So for Jesus followers, isn't that our goal? Isn't that what we want? To have our hearts and our minds drawn towards the work of God. Jesus says money can get in the way, but it can also be a powerful tool to help align us with God. Now we're going to unpack all of that and how we can control our money. We're going to deal with that in the coming weeks. But for now, I want to just cast a vision. I want you to imagine the impact of a community who makes their resources available to God. What if a church got serious about this? And what if a church got serious about making sure their money wasn't the idol that they were worshiping, but instead it was a tool that they had given to God? And that's what we're emphasizing with this +5. It's an invitation to grow in your giving. I think you're going to see that it has a similar kind of an impact like what we found with the just one part of this series that we did. This is going to have an impact on you. And this is going to have an impact on the people around you. We spent 5 weeks talking about just one. We're challenging everyone here at Cap City to bring one person to Jesus this year. And we know that not everyone is going to want to follow Jesus. And we understand that people can't be forced to follow Jesus. That's not the idea. And we know that limiting this to one person is not exactly the idea that we're pursuing either. God wants all people to come to him. So do we. We're in agreement with him on this one. But simply put, what we are doing is we're really trying to get everyone in the game. If everyone at Cap City would be serious and participative, if everyone had this same goal to have someone in mind that they want to bring to Jesus. If you have more than one, that's even better. But we just want to be mindful of this. We want to be intentional. We want to be focused on trying to bring people to Jesus. And we found that there's an impact on this on you. Just one has the ability to reinforce our own spiritual health and our own growth as you seek to reach others. As you're trying to reach other people, you're going to grow spiritually. The same can be said of this +5. What we do with our money has huge implications on our own faith. And yet, just like with just one and the impact that it can have on the people around you, same with +5. It has the potential to grow the faith of people who are blessed by your generosity. Also, just like this just one part, this this +5 section, it's not for everyone. Some of you don't need to be nudged to start bringing people to Jesus because you're already on it. You already have a passion and a target. Same goes for giving. Maybe you're already there. In fact, some of you may be giving too much. You may be giving too sacrificially. You may be giving more than you should at this point in your life. I don't know, but if that's you, then this challenge isn't for you. If you're already doing what's right between you and God, then just keep doing what you're doing. However, the reason that we're putting an emphasis on giving is because for many of us, we aren't in the game. The challenge is for you to get in the game. Just like some people need to get in the game to get the people in their life closer to Jesus, maybe you need to start participating in the spiritual discipline of giving. Maybe your giving isn't anywhere near a God-honoring level. And so here's the math, and more importantly, the invitation. +5 is an invitation to increase your giving by either $5 or 5%. Might look something like this. Maybe you're a family of 4 and you give $50 a week. What could you increase that to $70 a week? That'd be $5 per person per week. Now, I'll tell you right from, like, those numbers are arbitrary. I don't really care about any of them. If you don't give anything, start with $5. Start with $3. I don't care. We just really want to see growth. We believe that growing in your giving makes you healthier. It's actually good for you, and it's good for the people around you. Now, the bigger level challenge in this is that percentage part, and again, this is not for everyone. If you've been around church for a long time, then you've probably heard the word tithe, which is a Bible word. If it's new to you, a tithe just means 10%. We're going to talk, again, a lot more about this over the next coming weeks. Here's just a real brief, quick introduction. The idea is that as an act of worship, a person would give 10% of their income to God. It's not an idea that the church came up with. It's not something that you see taught specifically in the New Testament. In fact, it's something that they had been practicing for centuries in Judaism. This is something that came straight from God. In more than one place, God gave the Israelites the command to tithe. And there's different kinds of tithes that they would give at different times. Sometimes a tithe is given to the temple in the form of money. Sometimes it's given in the form of a harvest. The New Testament writers would have seen a tithe as part of their worship of God. The idea of a tithe has kind of been adopted for Christians, and it kind of works well that way. But giving, the way that it's taught in the New Testament, is a little bit different. We're going to, again, look at that over the next few weeks. But I want you to catch this. The tithe kind of serves like a benchmark. But just because a tithe is a benchmark doesn't mean that people live up to it. Research shows that only about 5% of Christians give a full 10% tithe. I've seen numbers that suggest the average Jesus follower gives around 3% of their income to any charity, including all charities. That means that on average, a Christian will give less than 3% of their income to the church. And I know that anytime we have these conversations, I know what you guys are thinking. I know the assumptions that people have when a preacher starts talking about money. I know this is the topic that some people use as an excuse to stop going to church. I want to be very transparent, very truthful. I hate this. I hate talking about this. Partly because this is convicting to me, and I don't like that. Right? But also because I don't want to ever come across like I'm fake or just begging for money. Guys, I'm really serious about Jesus, and he's the only thing that I'm trying to lead people to. But if you let Jesus into your life, he's going to start doing some rearranging. He's going to start shifting some of your priorities. And giving is one of those things that Jesus is going to start messing with. And so I have to talk about giving. Because this is a worship issue. This is a heart issue. One day I'm going to stand before God and give an account of how I've led the people that he's put under my care. And if I've sat back and let you worship money, then I have failed. Now I need you to use your brain in this. If your giving is in a good spot, if your giving is even sacrificial, then this doesn't apply to you, right? We talk about all sorts of stuff here that doesn't apply to everyone in the room. We do a series on marriage, we do a series on parenting, we talk about addictions and mental health and all sorts of stuff that may not apply directly to you. If this is not a challenge that you need to hear, then just sit back and listen, right? But research shows that this probably applies to 95% of the people in the room. So that means that there may be a heart issue in our church. There may be something that we need to deal with, and it means that there may be a worship issue, and so we probably need to grow. And so in 2026, I'm just going to invite you to grow. The number's arbitrary. Whether it's $5 or 5% or anything else, I don't really care. I'd love for you to move from 3 to 4%. I'd love for you to move from $10 to $12. I don't really care. Just grow. The invitation for you is to grow. Also, don't forget this. This goes back to the Great Commission where we started this entire series. And that whole phrase there, go and make disciples. The reason I think this fits is because I think giving is a part of how we participate in becoming a disciple. I'm going to show you again over the next few weeks how it looks, but I'm telling you, it looks like an act of obedience. When we get serious about giving, we are exhibiting obedience and faithfulness, and that's the goal. That's what it looks like to be a disciple. We want to be like Jesus. Jesus is generous. We want to be generous. And through our faithfulness, with generosity, it helps fulfill the mission of the church to make more disciples. Which means that when we practice this, when we get serious about this, God does a work on us, and he begins doing a work on the people around us. It's incredible. What we do with our money has huge implications on our faith. What we do with our money builds something within us, and it impacts the faith of the people who are blessed by that generosity. And so when we get serious about making our money go where it's supposed to go in order to honor the Lord, don't be surprised when your kids are impacted because they're watching. Maybe it's your neighbors who are watching you prioritize God over trying to keep up with the rest of the neighbors. Or maybe it's the many people who are just blessed by the resources that come from the church and from your giving. Guys, your giving helps your soul, and it blesses others. So what if Jesus was serious about what he said about our hearts and our treasures? And what if we were serious about protecting our heart from serving the wrong master? If we got serious about that, according to Jesus, then our hearts would be drawn to God as our resources flow in his direction, because where our treasure goes, our hearts tend to follow. Even if it feels like obedience, even if it feels like just going through the motions, eventually it can turn into a desire of the heart. Can you imagine? Imagine if our church beat the odds of that stat about only 5% of Christians tithing. Can you imagine what barriers to the gospel would be removed? Can you imagine what we could do as a church under the Spirit's leading? But I'm going to tell you, even more than that, more important than any of those things, can you imagine what would happen if we got serious about honoring God with our money? About aligning our hearts with our Heavenly Father? I really honestly believe what I'm about to say, but I think that if we got serious about this, I think that's the kind of church that could change the world. I'm serious about it. This is what makes me get up in the morning. I believe that we could change the world and we could change eternity. It starts with us making sure that we worship our God. That's what we're going to do, guys. I want to invite you to do difficult things. I'm going to challenge you to do difficult things and to honor God, even in the ways that maybe don't come natural, don't seem convenient or easy. Can we grow? Can we just get closer? I want to pray that over you. God, I'm so grateful for these people and their commitment to honoring you and worshiping you. God, I'm grateful for the person in the room who's here for the first time, and this is a little bit surprising. God, I'm grateful for the people in this room who've been faithful to you with their money for decades. God, we're all in different spots. God, I pray that we would just respond appropriately to your leading of the Spirit right now. God, that we would honor you in our lives, because it's good for us, it's good for your kingdom. God, give us the courage to do what you've called us to do. It's in Jesus' name we pray. Amen.